she thought that someone could be the nominee of a national party who joked about groping women. These are not issues that he is going to push aside. And he is starting to think, they say, about them very deeply, about how he can have impact, what his role will be in the Democratic Party, and with an approval rating now of 60%, he certainly has the opportunity to go out there. So while he may be quiet for a while, and I've been spending a lot of time over the course of the last couple of weeks talking to the people who have been closest to him over the course of his presidency and who will remain close to him after he leaves office, he will not be quiet for long.
Chris Jensen, what was the former White House swimming pool in the years since renamed the James Brady Briefing Room in the honor of Ronald Reagan's badly wounded press secretary.
And sometimes you feel like you're treading water.
Yeah, I understand that. It's been good for many metaphors over the years. Chris, thanks. And over to our political director, Chuck Todd. Chuck, what were the highlights by way of your watching this?
Look, it's the last question, because the last question, to me, allowed him to essentially restate what I feel like was the message he intended to send when it at least came about the transition, the inauguration, and sort of the message to the Democrats overall, which is remain calm. You know, this is not, I mean, I love that when he said, this is not the end of the world. The end of the world is only the end of the world. And he was using it was almost like he was saying, and he didn't put it this way, but I was hearing it this way, which is, boy, my daughters are not moping around. They're not being hangdog. They're picking themselves up off the ground. Okay, what's next? What do you do next? And I think the combination of him, on one hand, saying he basically avoided the boycott question altogether. In fact, said, I think the weather's going to be great. We're looking forward to it. Michelle and I, it was like a subtle signal there. But again, I go back to that last question because in many ways, that is Barack Obama. He's always got a long view. That frustrates some people sometimes. Sometimes the view's too long, some of his aides would say. But he was taking the long view, both for the Democratic Party, but also think about his own legacy, right? He wants the long view in that. I mean, I think he's done, frankly, a pretty good job of sort of recalibrating how his legacy should be judged. Hey, you know, he's used the 2 steps forward, 1 step back metaphor. He said today, you know, some of these things where we don't see eye to eye, you know, maybe over time they'll come to the same conclusion I came to. You know, he's not written anybody off, including Donald Trump. And I loved at the end he said, oh, journalists keep asking me, oh, what do you really think? And he's saying, no, this is what I really think. And again, I saw that as him also, look, he said he's going to be comfortable speaking out, which also means I think a lot of people in the Democratic Party are going to be looking to him essentially as the de facto leader until there is a next nominee. And that was, to me, him sending a message to Democrats. Hey, you may be upset, but work through this process. Don't get cynical and stop moping.
All right, Chuck Todd, who gets the easy job Sunday morning of summing up a new administration thus far after 2.5 days of said
2 days, man.
administration. We'll be watching because you always manage to get it done on Sunday mornings. Chuck, thank you. Gene Robinson, Pulitzer Prize winner with the Washington Post, standing by. Eugene, same question to you.
Well, you know, my question going in, Brian, was how active and vocal is President Obama going to be as an ex-president? And I think we got the answer. I mean, I heard loud and clear that he's not going to really do what George W. Bush did. He's not going to retire to the ranch and clear brush. He's not going to take up a new hobby of painting, although he did say he's going to write some. But he listed not just things that he not just cares about, but things that he sees are beyond the pale of our democracy, and that he has to speak out on, and I expect him to. So voting rights, he named the Dreamer kids and attempts to kick them out of the country. He named any sort of systemic discrimination and also obstacles to any attempt to silence dissent or the press. And so to the extent that you know, conceivably the new administration moves, in his view, along any of of these verboten paths, I think you're going to hear him, and I think he'll be not just vocal but pretty loud.
Gene, I heard Jonathan Chait, the writer and journalist, make this point last night that when the Obamas fly away from Washington, it is, along with other uniquenesses, it's a real unique moment in our history. Young man leaves Washington not with tail between legs, untainted by scandal, big brain, big agenda, a lot of thoughts, a lot of energy. It's really going to be interesting.
Yeah, it sure is. I mean, I kept thinking that too. As I watched the news conference, and I said, he's really pretty young. He's still really young. He has grayed some, but he's a young guy, in the prime of life. Having served 2 terms as president, it's not a normal situation. We have seen it before. Bill Clinton was very young. He became an ex-president. He went on to form the Clinton Foundation and the Global Initiative, and to be very active and to do a lot. And one wonders what will be the big project that we see from Barack Obama. It's not imaginable. The one thing that's not imaginable, I think, is that he just sort of fades away. I think he's going to be a real presence in our nation's public life for many, many years to come.
Great, Gene. Thank you for that. John Meacham, the historian and author, has been watching and listening with us, and
where he offered, once again, this kind of tragic view of history. And to some extent, it's a Reinhold Niebuhr view. Obama talked about Niebuhr, the great theologian, when he first began running for office. And Niebuhr once wrote, "The sad duty of politics is to establish justice in a sinful world." The sad duty of politics. And I think Obama, to some extent, has always seen politics as a kind of twilight. As he said, there is evil in the world. It's a big, complicated country. You try to make things a little bit better. And that kind of nuanced view of the universe is not one that we're going to hear, I think, at noon or so on Friday. And so, as ever, the American people have hired someone quite different from the person who was in office, or to Donald Trump, the reality TV star. And so there's something in the American soul that bounces from pole to pole.
boy, there's something about your gift with words and the way you sum up our trends that is chilling. John, you've written about so beautifully about presidents in our past that because of the passage of time you can't possibly come to know, and yet you've also spanned the other end of that spectrum. You've had 41 sit down and say, here it is, all of it. Here's my letters, my notes, my thoughts, here's my entire life. And now you've heard a tour of the confines of the mind of this young, departing 55-year-old president who has his own specific column in history. What do you make of that?
Well, I think Obama and 41 actually have a good bit in common. When I interviewed President Obama about 41, as you mentioned a moment ago, he spoke in these camera-ready paragraphs, talking about how the senior Bush had proven to be a gentleman from afar and up close, and that President Bush Sr. did things that are unimaginable for a Republican president to do since. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the budget deal that set the stage for the prosperity of the 1990s, the management of the end of the Cold War. Bush 41 saw the world in shades of gray. So does President Obama. It's hard to imagine two more different American men than George Herbert Walker Bush, the grandson of G.H. Walker, the son of a United States Senator, a son of Greenwich Country Day School, Andover, and Yale, and Barack Hussein Obama, who never knew his father, essentially, who came from Hawaii, from about as far away from Greenwich, Connecticut as you can get in the United States. And yet they both came to the office, and I think they both saw it in similar terms. They wanted to keep bad things from happening. They were willing to deal in complexity when the press and the country seemed to want more simplified, simplistic answers. So there's a kind of historical resonance right now that 41 is on our minds, and that President Obama has just offered, I
funny to hear it, but it is true. And it's funny to hear it because then Senator Obama won by running as the loudest and the harshest critic of Bush 43's presidency and all of his policies, whether it was terrorism or the economic policies. Yet, at the same time, I think he also held and respected 43's father, President Bush 41, who we're talking about today. And when he awarded him the Medal of Freedom, it was apparent that there was nothing funny about giving him that award, that he did understand his place in history. And John Meacham makes the perfect point, of course, because he's John Meacham and he writes perfect books and makes perfect points on TV. But 41 was punished by losing to Bill Clinton ultimately for trying to explain these nuances and for actually doing something that I can't imagine the current president-elect doing, trying to answer questions honestly. He said, read my lips, new taxes. When it came time to deal with the country's finances, he had to go back on that promise. I believe President Obama would sacrifice a campaign promise to do something he had to do to govern. Both men, I think, held governing ahead of politicking. I think that's something they had in common. And again, in context of the way we sort of swear and swoon and swerve back and forth, Donald Trump is just a stunning reaction to 8 years of Obama's presidency.
We urge our viewers who have not had the pleasure of sitting down with a John Meacham book or Kindle product, start with his biography of George H.W. Bush 41, especially right now that he's on our minds. John Meacham, thanks. McPhaul, thanks. And the last word in this segment goes to our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell. Andrea, what a time in our world. And as I was saying to John and Nicole, what an expansive tour of the mind of the outgoing president.
Extraordinary. And having covered him and Bush 41, I just wanted to add a little note to what Nicole and John Meacham have said so eloquently. While we were on the air, Bill Clinton tweeted, and he tweeted to 41 and Barbara, thinking of you and sending both, thinking of you both and sending wishes for a speedy recovery. Love, 42. And as you know, even after that